The stalls are clean, the horses are fed, and I am ready to head out to my first horse auction of the year. This auction is pretty far away from my house and I'm running a little bit late as usual. Pretty much every auction that I attend, I bring my horse trailer along. Although I do have a lot of enabling friends that would probably trailer a horse for me if I bought one, it's always nice just to have mine along. It is a little bit late in the year for me to be going to my first sale, but I like to make sure that all of my big chores are complete. Many people can get carried away with the amount of horses that they can handle, and I'm pretty close to that number for myself. Before I even think about bringing a new horse home, I need to make sure I can adequately take care of the ones I already have. Okay, I think we're ready, buddy. I've got one more thing I have to do before we hit the road, and that is check on my quarantine pen. It is also going to be way too hot for me to bring Huckleberry along. He gets really excited when we go to horse sales, and he is just not very well behaved. I've been slowly getting my quarantine area ready over the last couple of weeks. It is a really nice size pen for the horses or horse that I might bring home. If you are thinking about getting a horse at one of these auctions, it is extremely important to have a quarantine facility set up. A proper quarantine area will be far away from any other horses. A lot of people think the risk is to the horses already on the property, but with all of my horses being vaccinated, the risk is actually on the new horse. Their immune system has been really taxed by being at the auction, and any little bugs that my normal horses are carrying, the new horse may not be able to adequately fight off. A separate stall in the same barn as my regular horses is not a very good quarantine setup, which is one of the reasons I don't typically buy new horses over the winter. This area is perfect for the horses to unwind and recover from their time at the auction. Huckleberry is a little bit stinky this morning, so I'm just going to give him a quick dip in the creek before I head out. When Huckleberry gets disgusting, I don't actually give him a bath most days. We just go in the creek and he jumps around and gets pretty clean on his own.
Clean! Come on, let's go!
At this point, I remember that I may or may not have remembered to turn off the water to Skeletor's pen. So before I head out, I am going back to the barn just to double check. Skeletor is the one I will be shopping for a buddy today. His stall rest is not going very well, and he's been turned out 24/7 in the smaller arena. Ideally, I would like to get him a friend that can be quarantined, and then I can move Skeletor over in a couple of weeks. An older horse that needs a little bit of maintenance would be the perfect scenario today, but I never really know what I'm going to find at these auctions. And after a few hours drive and a small fortune in fuel, I make it to the sale barn. When I pulled in right away, I got a little bit nervous. This is probably the busiest I've ever seen this parking lot. There are a bunch of saddles in my tack room, so I'm going to make sure to lock it before I get back with the horses. This auction does have a tack sale, but I did not make it in time to see what was selling. There's only about an hour and a half until they start selling the horses, so I'm going to get right back in the pens and start evaluating them. This is the first auction of the season at this sale barn, so I was expecting a lot of skinny and older horses that didn't fare well over the winter, but really all the horses that I looked at were in really great condition. Well, not great for a normal horse, but great for an auction horse at this type of sale. It didn't take me very long until I found the first animal I was interested in. I have a soft spot for older mules. This is a guy that I had in for rehab a few years ago. While I am not super confident yet about training a young fractious mule, the older ones that have seen the world make the perfect companion for someone just getting started. The amount of experience they have in the mountains is irreplaceable in my opinion. So I am definitely going to take a very close look at this one. It can be pretty dangerous getting into a pen with a horse that you don't know at one of these auctions. Some of them can be quite fractious and dangerous, especially if you cannot read the animal properly. After standing at the fence for a minute or two, this guy came over and wanted me to give him a few little scratches. I think an older mule like this would be the perfect companion for Skeletor. They typically don't get too excited and they don't really do a lot of unnecessary running around. Skeletor needs a buddy, but not one that is going to entice him to play too much. I started checking out this mule like I do all the other horses. He did have some weird patches on his stifles, and some mules can be known to jump rather high fences. So that is something I always keep in mind when I'm thinking about bringing a mule home. He also got a little bit nervous when I tried to walk around him, which is totally fine. I'm still just getting to know him to see kind of what he's like. Some mules can be very shy around new people, and that is just something I've learned to deal with. I have a few friends that are really into mules, so if I ever have a question about one at a sale, I'll send them a quick video and ask them a few questions. Mules also have kind of a funny body shape. They can look quite thin even if they are in really good condition like this guy. Their back and rib cage are shaped a little bit differently. I was hoping to see his age on the little card his owner dropped him off with, but it wasn't there. As I continued to check out the horses and see what might be available, this guy really caught my eye. He was kind of reserved and in the back of the pen. He was pretty scared about what was going on, but he was definitely listening to every little sound. I heard someone say that this horse was around 5 years old and had been started. He was definitely very suspicious of what I was doing in his pen. A horse like this can be tricky to evaluate because I probably won't be able to get my hands on him. He also had a rope burn scar just like Pete's on his back leg. I would have loved to have put this guy on my list, but I just can't have another one like this at my barn right now. The next horse that caught my eye was the perfect companion for Skeletor. You could tell that this guy had seen a lot of the world. Nothing was really bothering him. He was pretty content just to eat all of the food that he had. He was a little bit stubborn about picking up his feet and then almost stepped on my foot, but I am not going to hold that against him. It looked like he was somewhere in the 15 to 20 range, and that really is the perfect age for what I'm looking for. He had nice healthy poops. He was probably around 14.3. A little on the smaller size, but that's okay with me. He did have some wind puffs in his hind legs, but that's really not a big deal for me. They could just be from him standing on the trailer to get here, or with his age, he might just stock up a little bit. He also looked like he drags his hind toes a tiny little bit. His information card did not have his age on it either. He was eating normally and I didn't get a chance to check his teeth, but regardless of his age, he's going to be the perfect companion for Skeletor this summer. This auction doesn't have very many horses, so I'm really happy that I found two that will work for what Skeletor needs. Even as I continued to look at the other horses, he just kept popping back into my mind. He was in a pen next to a young stallion and it didn't seem to faze him one bit. I am a little bit ahead of schedule, so I am going to be able to look at all of the horses that are for sale today. I took a quick minute to evaluate this mare that I saw. She had some significant abnormalities in her hock, which probably would not be able to be rehabbed. If you are going to go to a sale like this, you need to be prepared to see horses like this. She would make probably a fine pasture pet for someone, but for me, who already has a few of those, I just cannot afford to take them home. I saw another young horse that had some significant angular limb deformities. Basically, all of his hooves were pointing in different directions. I wanted to get a video for you guys, but honestly, it just really bummed me out to see him here. I did notice that there was a rescue that was looking at the horses, so hopefully they snatch up a few of the at-risk ones. As I was going through the sale, this horse caught my eye. I have a terrible time remembering the humans that I meet, but if I evaluate a horse at an auction, usually if they come through again, I will recognize them. This horse had a bad knee, and I remember it from months and months ago. A horse that cannot properly straighten their leg is going to have some significant problems. Some may be serviceably sound, but I'm guessing this guy is not. This horse went through the same sale 8 months earlier. Even back then, you can tell by the way he's standing that his knee is definitely bothering him. When he went through the ring, then he ended up selling for $2,700. Looking back at this video, you can see that he was significantly thinner then as well. It looks like he put on about 300 pounds, and that probably really affected his knee. I feel really bad for the people that bought him in the fall. It is likely that he will require a couple $1,000s a year in maintenance just to maybe stay sound. Realistically, I can't put him on my list today, but I'll be interested to see how much he sells for. There was another handsome mule that looked like he could be a possibility, but upon closer inspection, he just was not calm enough for me to feel confident in bidding on. There was another half draft in his pen who was a little standoffish as well. I really need a confident, no-nonsense kind of horse to be with Skeletor. These two were just not quite quiet enough for me to even consider. I do, however, have a mule friend that might be interested in this one, so I took a little video and sent it to her. And before I knew it, it was time to head up to the sale ring. I got one last look at that little horse I'm really interested in, and I heard someone say that he was a foxtrotter. I don't really need a trail horse, but it would be really fun to have an old trusty gelding that I can just relax and take Skeletor out on the trail with. I think it would be really good for him to get ponied around just to try and keep his mind a little bit more quiet.
Bring me in, I'll tell you everything we know about himself to the highest bidder.
There were a few horses that I looked at before the sale that were just not going to be within the price range that I wanted to stay in. I looked at this little young mare, but she ended up just not making sense for me to bring home. This time of year, young prospects like this do sell for a little bit more.
And her dad was a thoroughbred, therefore she's considered a grade. Actually, she's a...
And when the bidding ended, she ended up selling for $1,000. The next one in the ring was that little stud horse. I didn't even check to see if both of his testicles were down or not. It looked like the rescue that was here was really interested in getting him. While I'm at these sales, I really don't ever bid against a reputable rescue. They ended up getting him for $350, and it's nice to know he'll get some quality care. A few of the horses did get ridden through at the sale. This horse was pretty handy, and he was probably the most broke that was here today. He ended up selling for $6,000, which I thought was a little bit high for what he was. But being the only really broke horse probably increased that price a little bit. This mare was super cute. She was 19 years old, I believe. She would have made a pretty good companion for Frisco Bill, but that is really not what I'm looking for today. She looked like a horse that pretty much anybody could get along with. The people in front of me did end up bidding on her, but in the end she went to somebody else for $1,900. There were a few other young prospects that sold. It seemed like all of the young horses were going for around the same price. This one sold for $1,000. I was surprised to see that little foxtrotter horse being ridden through the ring. I thought that he was definitely going to be loose, so I had to think pretty quick on my feet about how much I wanted to pay for him. They said he was 18, which was a little bit older than I had initially wanted. And after some back and forth, he ended up no-sailing. The owner wanted $2,500 for him, and that is definitely a fair price for what he was. When I go to a sale like this, I usually budget for a horse that's around $800 or less. And typically I set aside somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 for their rehab. After thinking about it for a while, I thought $2,500 for that horse would be really reasonable for me to pay. I am going to try and get with the owner after this sale and see if I can buy him, if I don't get anything else. That little mare with the bad hock ended up selling for $650. The little wide-eyed horse with the rope burn ended up selling for about what I had expected. He did sell to a private home for $550. It was pretty hard for me not to raise my hand when he was in the ring, but I just don't need a horse like him right now. When that older mule entered the ring, it looked like he was a little bit more saucy than I had expected. He would probably still be the perfect companion for Skeletor. I had to put my phone down while I bid on this guy.
Is that where it's at? 4.5 and pop, get me 5. 5.5. 500, I got 500, 5.5. I got the gentleman right here, 500, 5.5.
I ended up having a bid of $450 in for the horse. As the bidding went along, I noticed a private buyer in front of me was interested in him. Sometimes at these sales, I get the feeling that the horse is just not right for me at the time. I really liked the mule, but with a private buyer wanting him to, I was fine to just step away. When I'm at these auctions, I kind of like to wait for one that really doesn't have any other options. This little walking horse went for $400. This older horse was having a lot of trouble being away from its herd mates. But when the bidding was over, he ended up selling to the people in front of me for $1,000, and they seemed really excited to have him. This was a gorgeous roan that was selling. I didn't look at him earlier on purpose because I knew he was going to sell for much more than I wanted to pay. He was also not the kind of temperament I needed. I did not write down how much he sold for, but it was more than $1,000. I think somebody got a screaming deal on this cute little girl. She had a pretty obvious lameness in her stifle that was called out in the ring. She was only 2 years old, and this is the kind of horse that you bring home and turn out for a couple years and see if she grows out of it. She sold for $700. This was a cute little pony that ended up selling for $700 as well. I had thought really hard about purchasing this horse, but when he came through the ring, he was lame on more than his bad knee. This is probably the hardest part of going to sales like this. I am not a rescue, and I can't just bring home every horse that I want. With multiple lameness issues, he would be extremely hard to find a responsible owner for. This older half draft ended up selling for higher than I thought he would. It was more than $1,000 as well, but I didn't catch exactly how much. I didn't really have any other horses on my list, so I just watched the rest of the sale. When this guy was in the ring, he kind of took my breath away. He was registered and really just a good-looking horse. I missed exactly what was said, but he had some kind of lameness issue going on that they could not quite pinpoint. This is another one that I would really like to have had at my barn to try and figure out. He ended up selling for quite a bit more than $1,200. When this horse came in the ring, he looked like he would also be the perfect buddy for Skeletor. And even though I did not look at him before the sale, I decided to go ahead and bid on him.
500, 600, 400, at 5 and 6 and 5 and 6 and 700, 700, 6 and 700, 700, 650, that's 650, 6.5, 750, 800.
I ended up bidding on this guy but stopped at $800, which is what he ended up selling for. Without a proper evaluation, there are a number of things that could have been wrong with him that I would have no idea about. And those kinds of decisions need to be made in a few seconds. This handsome half draft ended up selling for much more than I had anticipated. He ended up selling for $1,300. This one did go to a private home. There were only a few horses left and I was kind of itching to bid on something else, but when this little mule came through, I hadn't heard back from my friend yet. The note said that he had packed in the mountains for several years. An animal like this who had been working season after season would probably find it hard to stay calm in a pen with Skeletor. He ended up selling for $600. I think some of these horses must have been dropped off after the auction started because I did not recognize them or remember looking at them at all. This was a really handsome horse that went through. It sounded like a lot of people knew the owner and what kind of horse this was. So even without him being ridden through and with limited information, he sold higher than I think most people would expect for a loose horse. There were some traders at the sale and they are happy to invest in a horse that rides if they know they can resell it somewhere else for more. This guy ended up selling for $2,500, which was a pretty fair price for him. The last horse that ended up going through the ring was a cute little Palomino mare. Before I had time to even think about bidding on her, it was over and she sold for $500. For the small number of horses at this sale, it was pretty well attended. I had trouble getting out at a swift pace to go see if I could buy that foxtrotter. By the time I got outside and to the back pens, they had already left. I was pretty bummed about that, but there is a good chance I may see him at another sale later on. I really didn't have any expectations for the day other than trying to find Skeletor a buddy. Since he has been on turnout 24/7, he is doing a lot better with his mind. As I go to more auctions this spring, I am pretty confident that eventually I'll find a buddy for him that is suitable. I will be attending a lot more auctions this spring, so if you guys are interested in seeing those, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned for the next video.